Hey Maryland Vapors, just thought I'd do a video here in response to some requests. Some of you were wondering about how to set up a Genesis atomizer, what I think the best method is. So I am going to rebuild my rocket here. Obviously, if you get different Genesis atomizers, they're not going to look exactly the same, but the same basic parts should be there. It'll have a wick hole, a negative contact, and a positive post. Now, in the interest of saving some time, I'll just cut right to the part that most people don't get right when they first start coiling Genesis atomizers. Firstly, they will look to see what size the wick hole is. In the rocket's case, this is 3 millimeters. These, by the way, are some gauge pins that I got at avidvapor.com. I think they were a couple bucks. They come in really handy, but some people just prefer to use something laying around the house like a drill bit or something like that. But so the rocket wick holes are 3 millimeters, and this pin fits exactly inside of that wick hole. So most people, they will try to wrap their wicking coils using something that is the exact same size as the wick hole. I have found that that is not the way you want to do it. You want to do your wick and coil a little bit smaller than what the wick hole is. So this is a 2.5 millimeter pin right here. And as you can see, once it's inside there, it's got some play. So it's got a little bit of, it's got a little bit of freedom to move around within that wick hole. So we will use that 2.5 millimeter pin or drill bit or whatever you're using, and take our wire. Actually, I'll torch the wire first. I've found torching the wire really helps to get rid of some of the springiness that's in there, so that once you do wrap your coil, it's not going to want to uncoil on you as easily. So just get a little butane torch, apply some heat. Get the wire red hot. You really only need to torch the part of the wire that you're going to be wrapping your coil with. So we'll take our 2.5 millimeter pin, try and get this on camera. Hold your wire against the pin. Start wrapping. Try and do this as nice and neat and evenly spaced as possible. Keeping good tension on there. I want it to be nice and snug. I want it to be real good and tight on whatever you're wrapping it around. So once you do have your wraps on there, you want it to be able to slide up and down and move on that pin, but you want to make sure that there really isn't any gaps in where it's really hanging off. Like you want that wire to be tight onto that pin. So once we have our coil, put the pin right down into the wick hole. And secure the negative lead, which is usually going to be your bottom lead. Secure that under whatever negative nut that you have on your Addy deck. And here it is, Allen wrench. And what I like to do is once you trap it on there, you want to trap it clockwise around underneath of the screw head, so that once you tighten it up, that screw head, it will tighten the wire with it. as opposed to if you had wrapped it the other way, then while you're turning the nut this way, it may put some slack into that coil. This way it tightens it up. And once you have that screwed down, let's see here, to have something handy. Bear with me, there we go. Then I'll just clip this excess off here. Get it out of the way. So, same deal with the positive. We'll just, before you trap it under the nut, give it a good pull. Make sure you have some really good tension on there. Wrap it around the post. Hold it with your thumb so it's not going to go anywhere. Now what you want to do is make sure that you have a little bit of room, just a little bit, to play with where the coil is going to be placed. And I'll show you why in just a second. So you'll just tighten this positive nut down, just like that. Space your coils out. Make sure everything's even, nice and neat and even. And here is the tricky part. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this very well, but oh, there we go. That's better focus. You want to make sure that your pin is being held directly in the center of the wick hole. And basically what I mean by that is that you want your coil to, your pin is going to be, is right now where your wick is going to be. And you want your wick not to touch the outside edges of your wick holes. Okay, because a lot of times when you get hot legs, which is the part of the wire that's going to your contact and not necessarily part of the coil itself, when that glows really bright and the rest of the coil doesn't glow, or if one or two wraps of the coil glows really bright and the rest of it does not glow as bright, basically those are short circuits. The electrical current is traveling through the wire and then hitting the mesh, and then the mesh, because it's stainless steel mesh and it is electroconductive, because the mesh is touching the deck of the atomizer, it's jumping just straight from the mesh to that, rather than going through the length of the coil, which is what you want it to do. And this way, your wick is not going to be touching the atomizer deck, so there's no risk of shorting out that way. So once we have our coil in place, gently, without trying to disturb where you have that coil, take your pin out, and where did those clippers go? There we go. Clip the excess. Oh, apparently did not have that down well enough. So get that good and tight, that positive nut. Make sure the wick placement's right. Now we'll clip the excess. And I find it kind of helps as when you're trying to take your pin out without disturbing anything. I find it kind of helps if you twist it or like rotate it a little bit as you're pulling it out. Alright, so now you will see your coils glow just like that when you pulse fire it. And what doing this pulse fire on its own will do also will sort of heat treat that coil to stay where it's at. So you just want to do that a couple times. You definitely don't want to overdo it. And now we're going to start working on the wick. I've cut, what I do is it's a double wick. Actually can't take credit for it. I got the idea from Jung Young Kim and Max Fettner. And this is the way that they wrap their wicks, and I find it really, really helps in terms of wicking quickly, but also preventing over wicking. So I have two pieces of mesh. One you'll see is bigger than the other. This is 325 mesh, and this is number 200 mesh, which is a lot thinner and flimsier. Basically because the weaves are not as packed in and concentrated as they are in the 325 mesh. This is going to be your outer wick, and this is going to be my inner wick. Now the outer wick, what you want to do, I've already cut these, is you want to measure it so that it goes up a little bit past where your coil is going to be, and also about halfway to 3/4 of the way down down into the deck. And your inner wick, you want to measure so that it will go to about the same point, a little bit higher than where your coil is, but also down to the bottom of the tank. And now what we're going to do is take our handy dandy butane torch once again and give these a little bit of oxidation. In case you're not aware, what oxidation will do is oxidation will make the metal less electroconductive, so it will have less of a chance to get shorts. Now the problem with it is that you can over-oxidize your mesh, and when you over-oxidize the mesh, basically it messes with the pattern of the weave of the stainless steel mesh, and once that pattern of the weave is disturbed, it is does not wick quite as well. The capillary action just does not work as well as it would have if it was woven in perfect squares like it is when you first get it. So just give it a torching. You'll see that the color of it darkens. Typically I torch it about 3 times. If you can see on the edges, sometimes there'll be real bright flare-ups. Those are just basically loose threads of the stainless steel mesh. Typically, depending on how thick your stainless steel mesh is, you may be able to kind of burn those away with the torching. Because those loose threads can also be a problem with atomizers shorting out. So we'll take our same 2.5mm pin, and let's make sure I got this the right way here. Yeah, that looks good. And we will start rolling it around this pin. Just like that. Now, because of the way the direction that you roll it does matter, in that when you want to do some adjusting of when you want to adjust how well that your wick fits into your coil, you can, if you look where the edge of this is, if you roll it the way that you had initially rolled it, so in this case away from you, that will tighten your wick. And if you accidentally make the wick too small, you can roll it the opposite way, and that will basically unroll and thicken your wick. So what we're going to do now is give this another torching. Let's put something in it here just to kind of hold it so that I don't have to hold this with my fingers. Oh, and I'm dropping things. Okay. Now we're going to roll it a little bit more without the pin inside of it to make it a little bit smaller than the pin that we rolled it on, so that it will fit inside of the coil. Or yes, inside of the coil. So let's just check real quick to see if this fits. Oh, too thick. So we're just going to roll it a little bit more, keeping a little bit, just a little bit of pressure on there, because you want it to still retain that nice round shape, but you don't want to crush it. Alright, it's still a little bit thick, but we're getting close. So roll it a little bit more. Alright, so now that's fitting inside there. It's actually a little bit loose, so while it's inside of the coil, we will roll it the other way, and that will loosen it up, loosen up the roll on it to give it a little bit more tension while it's inside, just so it holds its place in there better. So you'll see that. We're actually going to flip this around the other way, just because the other side looks to be a little bit darker. And that's what you want. You want that nice, the most oxidized part of your wick, you want where the coil is going to go. You want to do a little bit of adjusting just to make sure everything's nice and neat. Once again, make sure that your wick is not touching any of the walls of the atomizer around it. Give it some pulse fires. Nudge it a little bit. and you'll see that pretty much immediately all of the coils will start glowing at the same time, evenly. Whoops, might have just screwed something up there. There we go, that's what we want to see there. Okay, now the inner wick. Since, as you can tell, that outside wick does not go all the way into the tank, it's not going to be very much help to you in actually wicking the juice, really, unless you, tip your atomizer at a pretty extreme angle. So we'll just take a real small gauge pin here, and this inner wick will sort of help to bring the juice up to the outside wick, the outer wick, which is going to be touching the coil and where all the vaporization is going to happen. So we'll just roll this outer wick onto this pin here. Make it nice and tight. Torch this bad boy as well. Try not to burn yourself. Easier said than done. You want it to be pretty small. You don't want it to fit too snug inside of there. You actually just kind of want to drop it right in to where your first wick is. All right, so, and as you might be able to see there, let's see if I can get, it's almost coming to the bottom of the tank, but not quite. So, once again, just give it a pulse fire, make sure that you didn't screw anything up with the coil, which this looks to be good. Now, really that's pretty much it. Now all you got to do is add juice and go. Put some vented in here. I've been stuck on this vented. It is unbelievably good. It's a vanilla tobacco, so if you're at all into vanillas, vanilla custard, and or tobacco, strongly recommend you give this a try. Oh, and the other advantage with this, making your wick smaller than the wick hole, is that it has room on the outside to breathe, so that when you're filling up your tank, you don't need like a small needle nose syringe or anything like that. As you can see, the air is coming up right around there, around the wick. Okay. Now, we got the wick all saturated. Tank is full. Make sure it's producing for us. Looks to be good. Don't see any hot spots, hot legs, anything like that. Alrighty, now top cap. Top cap on. Put you a little baby shorty drip tip on there. And you should be good to go. Alright, thanks for bearing with me through that, guys. This was really pretty much the first video. One of the first vaping videos that I've ever made. Definitely the first tutorial. Enjoy. Hope it works out for you. You know, comment in this thread if you have any questions or anything like that. And happy vaping. Almost forgot to mention, guys. Lastly, one thing that's very important to do is to check the resistance of your build. You know, you definitely want to be safe while you're vaping. So get yourself a resistance checker, somewhat similar to this. Here's the rocket we just built. Screw it in here and check out the resistance. Now, I like my resistance a little bit higher than you. You know, I know sub-ohming's a big thing here. Normally, I like to have my builds around 0.8, 0.9, maybe 1 ohm. And we'll see what this is at. So that is at 0.87. About 0.85 or so. And may have a little bit of looseness of a screw in there, so I'm going to just tighten up these screws one more time. By the way, if you don't know, battery safety is a huge deal to me. It should be a huge deal to you as a vapor as well. You know, certainly do not want these devices exploding in our faces. Where did my Allen wrench go? Allen wrench, Allen wrench. Where are you? Ah, here you are. Sorry about that. Make sure she's still firing. Looks like we have a little bit of a short. When I just tightened those screws, it may have moved the wick a little bit in the wick hole. So just readjust. And I'd say that's pretty damn decent vapor production for about a 0.9, 0.85 coil. All right, thanks again.